Welcome to the Transformation Church podcast, where we're leading people into a transforming relationship with Jesus. We hope this message inspires you, builds your faith, and gives you a fresh perspective on God and His Word so you can see transformation in your own life. Enjoy the message.
So let me say this as we step into today's message. I don't know what brought you today. I don't know if it was the tradition of Easter. I don't know if it was somebody that dragged you to church, a grandparent, or somebody that bribed you with lunch. Or maybe it's just the wrestling of the emotions we've been feeling lately, and just trying to figure out, like, what do I do with that? But here's what I know: no matter what reason you came today, that you are exactly where you need to be. And the reason why you're where you need to be is because Easter reminds us of something that really is applicable to our life, that God does His best work when we surrender what we can't fix to Him. When we surrender what we can't fix to Him. And this is really why we are kicking off this series called Big Butts of the Bible, and we're kicking it off on an Easter Sunday. I guarantee you there's not a whole lot of churches out there that are doing this series or this talk on Easter Sunday. But I really want to challenge you, as Brandon said, to lean in over the next 4 weeks, because there's such a powerful truth that is underneath the surface that we are building this series upon. Because the reality is that throughout Scripture, we see these phrases, but God. And these aren't just phrases in the Bible, they're moments in people's lives. They're moments when people felt like all was lost, like there was no hope, that their life or situation or whatever it is was hitting a dead end, until God stepped in. And that's why we are doing this series. That's why today we're kicking it off on Easter Sunday, because the biggest but of all is Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. That, friend, it literally is a game changer, because it didn't just change history, but it has the power to change our lives too. You know, several years ago, Andrew and I had some friends over to watch a Super Bowl 51. Maybe some of you remember that game between the Patriots and the Falcons. I'm a Patriots fan, but I'm not a Patriots fan by choice. I'm a Patriots fan by marriage. Because my wife spent a lot of her life in Maine, and so she kind of is a fan of all the sports teams that are up there, and she's such a fan that it almost became a part of our wedding vows. Like you're either going to be a fan or we're not going to do this thing, and so we had all these people over to the house to watch the game. And one of the guys that walks into the house is decked out, I mean, from foot to the top of his head with Falcons gear. Like, totally decked out. Like, so much so, I thought that the owner of the Falcons was getting ready to make a surprise visit to our house that night. And so he comes in, and we turn the game on, we start to watch it. And if you know anything about that game, the Falcons just take off to a huge lead, and they get up 28-3. And I mean, it surprises everybody. Like, even the commentators are just totally stunned at what's happening. And so this Falcons guy is like, he's in our living room, and he's talking like all of this trash. And Andrea, you know, she's such a sweet, kind person, and she's just kind of calm and quiet, but she's giving him that stare. Like if you're a married guy in the room, you know the stare. Like I've gotten the stare a few times. I got the stare once when I forgot our anniversary. I got the stare then. And then I got the stare again when I suggested that we didn't need that many throw pillows on our bed. I got the stare again. So we're watching this game, and Falcons are up 28-3. It's getting into the third quarter. There's 17 minutes left in the game, and the Patriots are now starting to come back, and they're getting score after score. They go on a 25-point run, and with 57 seconds left in the game, they tie the game up, and it goes into overtime. And my kind, precious wife looks over at this Falcons fan. You can imagine the whole mood in the room had totally shifted. Like he's not saying anything anymore. He was talking trash, but he's not saying anything anymore. And so she leans over to him and says, if we win the toss, we win the game. And friend, we won the toss and we won the game. And that guy got so mad. He got up, he grabbed his keys, he storms out the house. He didn't say, thank you for having me over. He didn't say, I appreciate the food. Like, he didn't say, have a good evening. Like, nothing. Like, congratulations, nothing. He just storms out the house, and his wife looks at us and says, well, I guess it's time to go. And they walk out of the house. And I want you to picture that moment with me for a second in the living room and kind of sensing the dynamic of the moment. That we were in the same room and we were watching the same game. It was the same scoreboard, but there were two totally different reactions to what was happening. The Falcons fan was celebrating early, and Andrea was quiet and calm. Now, why was she quiet and calm? She was quiet and calm because she had been there before. She had seen her team losing and Tom Brady bringing that team back to victory. She had seen it before. And so while this guy is celebrating and already beginning to plan out the parade in downtown Atlanta, she's holding on to hope. But she's not holding on to hope because the situation is promising. She's holding on to hope because she has faith and trust in the guy who's leading the team. And I say that to kind of say this, that maybe some of you have walked into this place today and maybe you're feeling like there's a situation that is in your life that you're navigating right now that you feel like you're losing. Maybe even some of you feel like you've almost lost. Maybe for some of you it's a friendship, it's a best friend that you guys just, man, for a long time in life, you guys have just been buddies and something's happened and it's eroded the trust and you don't know if that relationship will ever recover. Or maybe it's a marriage and you guys are living together, but your hearts are so far apart. Like all you do is argue. There's all this turmoil. There's no real understanding anymore in the relationship. And there's just so much distance. Or maybe it's your finances. Maybe it's a career. Maybe it's your job. Maybe you had the job that you loved and you got let go and you're just trying to figure out like what's next. Like it feels like the plans that I had for my future, they're just over. And I don't know what that situation might be, but I want to throw this out to you today. But what if it's not over? What if the thing that you walked in here today feeling like you're losing or that it's almost over, what if it's not over? You see, In Acts, we're introduced to a guy by the name of Paul. And Paul has this encounter with God in Acts chapter 9. And this is years after Jesus had died on the cross and rose again. And here Paul is in Acts 13, and he's preaching his first recorded sermon. And he's preaching this message to a group of people that they know about God. They've heard the stories of Jesus. They've heard the story of the resurrection. But here's the thing. They've heard all that. They're aware of all that. But there's a disconnect between the power of the moment, the power of the resurrection, and the significance that the resurrection has in their life. And so Paul, in the middle of his sermon, he says this in verse 29. He says that when they had done all of the prophecies said about him, speaking about Jesus, that they took him down from the cross and they placed him in a tomb. I want to just point out here in this verse that they had done everything. Like they had thrown everything that they knew to throw at Jesus to disrupt what God was wanting to do in his life and through his life. Maybe for some of you today in your situation, you've done all that you know to do, and you find yourself still headed down a path that seems like an utter loss is the only option. See, Paul mentions this in verse 29 in the middle of his sermon, but then he follows it with this powerful statement in verse 30. He says this, but God. That despite them doing everything that they could do to Jesus, but God raised him from the dead. And friend, these two words right here, this phrase, but God, was a game changer, not just for the people in Paul's day or the people in Jesus' day. It's a game changer for our lives too. And here's why. If we were to rewind the Easter game film back a couple thousand years, rewind it back before churches like TC, before the Easter Bunny, before the beautiful Easter outfits and those legendary Easter lunches, like before all of that, what we would find is a group of people that had given up everything to follow Jesus. A group of people that are now watching what has happened to Jesus and his death and his burial. And for them, they weren't just sad that he wasn't around anymore. They weren't just disappointed. They were devastated. They were devastated because they had built all of their dreams around Jesus. Their dreams of a better future, their hope that their present reality and the situations and the things that they were facing, that they would change. Even their faith in Jesus, like all of these things they were just holding on by a thread. And I just wonder today, how many people might feel that way about their lives or their situation. Like maybe you're here today and you can identify with what they were feeling in those days. You had some hopes and you had some dreams. You even had some faith in God for a period of time. And now all of a sudden the situations and the things that you're facing, you're just holding on by a thread. Or maybe for you kind of build the foundation of your life on some of the things that you wanted, some of the things that you thought would bring happiness and fulfillment. And now those things are beginning to fall apart or to erode. And it just feels like the life that you hoped that you would have is just kind of slipping through your fingertips at this point. And it's when we find ourselves in those situations in our life that those two words that Paul said in verse 30 matter so much. And they matter so much because when he was preaching a sermon, he wasn't just retelling the resurrection story to them. He was revealing what the significance of the resurrection story meant for them and for us. And it's this, that just because it looks finished doesn't mean it's final. And friend, I don't know what your it is. Maybe it's your marriage. Maybe it's finances. Maybe it's your emotions. Maybe it's your kids, your grandkids. Maybe it's your health. I don't know what your it is. But I do know this, there is a key. There's a key that unlocks what we feel like is finished and turns it into something that we realize isn't final. And that key is something that Jesus modeled in his life, and it's something that you and I often miss. We often overlook it when it comes to the Easter story. We go through a lot of things and we hear a lot of sermons, but we often miss this. You see, most people assume that the resurrection happened because God performed a miracle. And listen, he did perform a miracle. But most people miss the one thing that Jesus did to initiate that miracle. It was the one thing that he did that bridged the gap between verse 29 and verse 30. Verse 29 of having done all. And maybe some of you find yourself in this verse 29 life right now where you've done everything that you know to do, but just nothing seems to be changing or to get better. And you're just coming to a place in your life where you're starting to even adjust to the loss. Now, what if I told you today that there's one thing that bridges the gap? One thing that turns a verse 29 experience into a verse 30, but God moment experience in our life. One thing. And that one thing we see Jesus do before the resurrection ever happened. And we see it in Luke chapter 22. In Luke chapter 22, Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and it's before the betrayal, it's before the torture, it's before the cross, before the burial, before the resurrection, it's before all of that, and Jesus has this moment with God. And it's a moment that you and I can identify a lot with. It's this moment where he says, Father, if you're willing, take this cup. Take it from me. The cup represents just the hardship and the pain and the suffering that Jesus knows is ahead of him if he continues to move forward in what the Father wants him to do. And he has this moment with God that shows the humanity of Jesus, that he's like, God, is there any other way? Like, is there any other way for people's sins to be forgiven? Is there any other way than what you're asking of me to do? And then Jesus has this kind of moment here. Where is it? The semicolon moment. This pause where he transitions from a verse 29 experience And he says, "Yet not my will, but yours be done." Friend, what's the one thing that Jesus did? He surrendered control. He surrendered it. He said, "I'd love for things to be different, and I'd love for you to do it a different way, but at the end of the day, God, not my will, but yours be done." And friend, maybe you're stuck in this verse 29 because you've been trying to hold on to, you've been trying to control the outcomes and the decisions and all those kind of things, and nothing ever seems to get better. What if I told you that it will never get better until you do what Jesus did and you surrender the control of your life to Him? See, what Jesus shows us in this verse is that resurrection in your marriage, in your relationships, your finances, your emotions, whatever it is, whatever your situation is today, that resurrection begins where control ends. You know, I've experienced this truth myself in my own life. You know, it's easy to think that I'm a pastor and so, perfect life, whatever. But I've had my share of verse 29. Grew up in a home of drug addicts and alcoholics. Broken home, parents get divorced, my mom in and out of prison, prostitution. Started to head down that road myself, lived it myself, lived verse 29 myself, trying to do my own thing, and made a lot of stupid decisions. Some decisions, like some of you today, probably should have killed me. I was living in verse 29 until I had an encounter with God. Not a mental information encounter, but a heart encounter. A moment in 1997 that's so important, I've got it tattooed on my wrist. A moment that I surrendered my life to God, a moment that I surrendered the trauma of my past, a moment that I surrendered even my future to Him. And friend, when I let go of control and I totally surrendered, friend, God invited me into a verse 30 experience. Church, this is what I learned through that season of my life. That letting go of control, that it isn't giving up, and it's certainly not weakness. But instead, it's giving God room to move in our life. Friend, God has greater things than the situation that you're currently walking through today. But the greater things are on the other side of surrender.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's message, be sure to share it with your friends and tag us at TransformTLH. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to seeing your face in the place someday. Have a great week.